I was cyberstalked by a man I met online. To start this off, I want to say I am 22 and live in the South. I can't remember how old this man is, but he lives up north far from me. I often add back strangers on Snapchat and talk to them. I enjoy meeting new people online. Last spring, I added a man back on Snapchat. We began texting and snapping like usual. I had gotten home from work and was sitting around on the couch texting this guy when he said, "Would you like to talk on the phone?" I said sure. I gave him my number, which was the worst mistake I have ever made. We started talking on the phone and everything was normal until he started talking about his coworkers and how he often fantasizes about killing them one by one and how he would do it. I immediately felt uneasy and scared. I told him, "That's really dark. You should never think about doing that or want to do that to another human being. That's not right." Things then escalated. He accused me of being on their side and being one of them, and told me since I disagreed with him, I would be on his list too. I made up an excuse of why I had to get off the phone and hung up and blocked that man on everything. I'm glad that's over with. What a psycho, I thought. That's when the no-caller IDs started coming in. Hundreds and hundreds of voicemails and no-caller ID calls and texts from random phone numbers. Him threatening to kill me. Him threatening to kill my family in front of me and save me for last to watch. Threatening to burn my house down with me and my family in it. The voicemails, texts, and no-caller ID calls continued to flood in for days. In one of the voicemails, he said, "If I leave now, I can be in your city in 2 hours. I'm giving you a heads up to start hiding now before I find you." I did not tell this man what city I lived in. He looked up my area code to my phone number, I assume. I didn't sleep for 3 days, and after I got that chilling voicemail, I went to the police and made a report. They tracked the man down, and his local police department paid him a visit and told him if he called again, he would be arrested. I never heard from that man again. Sometimes I still look over my shoulder and wonder if that man will ever call or text me again, or if I will meet him face to face one day, and that will be my last. I was 19 years old when I decided to spend my summer vacation in Ohio. I rented a small, cheap basement apartment in an old house owned by an elderly couple in the suburbs of Toledo. The house was surrounded by a neglected yard, and the apartment had a separate, completely isolated side entrance. During the first week, everything was pretty normal and honestly a bit boring. I spent most of my time reading and browsing the internet. But things started to change at the beginning of the second week, specifically during the afternoons. In this area, the afternoons are dead silent because everyone stays indoors due to the heavy humidity. I started noticing a strange sound coming from the corner of the room, right behind the heavy wooden wardrobe that was fixed against the wall. It was a faint, steady scratching sound, like something alive was moving very slowly behind the drywall. At first, I just thought it was mice, which is pretty common in old houses around there. But the sound was too heavy and it never happened at night. It always started exactly at 1 p.m., lasted for a full hour, and then stopped out of nowhere. One day, wanting to get rid of the mice, I decided to push the heavy wardrobe aside to see what was behind it. When I finally moved it with great effort, a strange chill ran down my spine. The wooden wall behind the wardrobe had a small, neatly cut square covered by a piece of cardboard attached with old duct tape. I peeled off the cardboard very slowly. I expected to find a utility space filled with pipes or wires. But what was disgusting was the smell that immediately burst out. It was the scent of very old dust mixed with something that smelt like burnt sulfur. I pointed my phone's flashlight into the gap. There were no pipes. It was a narrow, dark tunnel extending horizontally beneath the foundation of the house. I carefully put my head inside the opening and shone the light to the very end of the passage. A few meters away, I saw something that made my breath completely catch. There was a small child's sneaker, blue and heavily faded, covered in a thick layer of dust. Right next to it was a long strand of blonde hair lying on the ground, and an old postage stamp from the 1980s scattered all around it. And at that exact moment, the power cut out completely in the apartment. The room went pitch black, and I heard it clearly coming from the depths of the dark tunnel right in front of my face. It was the sound of a deep, wet breath being drawn in, followed by a warm child's voice, whispering in pure terror, "Please, put the cover back before he wakes up." I scrambled backward violently, smashing my back against the wardrobe. I was hyperventilating in pure panic, surrounded by total darkness. I grabbed the piece of cardboard and frantically taped it back with shaking hands, then pushed the heavy wardrobe with all my strength to block the opening again. I immediately went upstairs, using the outdoor steps to speak with the owner of the house, Old Man Arthur. I knocked on the door loudly until it opened. He was wearing his gardening overalls and looked tired. When I told him that I heard strange noises and found a hidden opening, the look on his face changed completely. The kind expression vanished from his eyes, replaced by a cold, dead stare. He said in a sharp, dry tone, "That opening is just for maintaining the old heating pipes. Do not mess with it again, or I'll have to terminate your lease immediately." He didn't give me a chance to argue and slammed the door right in my face. I went back down to my apartment, completely shaken up. I couldn't sleep at all that night. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to a faint vibration in the apartment. The refrigerator in the small kitchen was making a strange noise, like it was shifting from its spot. I got up and turned on the living room lights with trembling hands. When I stepped into the kitchen, I froze. The fridge wasn't moving on its own. There was a small gap in the hardwood floor right beneath it, and there were human fingers, incredibly pale, long, and thin, with no fingernails, reaching up through the crack, slowly trying to pull the fridge's power cord downward to unplug it. I let out a terrified scream. In a split second, the fingers retreated back into the crack with a strange speed, and a heavy silence followed. I approached very slowly and looked through the small gap using my phone's flashlight. I didn't see a face. Instead, I saw a massive pile of papers and old photographs scattered down there. They were pictures of missing children, including a little boy wearing blue sneakers. Suddenly, a very wide eye appeared in the crack, staring right up at me from below. It blinked slowly. Then, I heard a sharp scratching sound of fingernails against the wooden floorboards right beneath my feet, moving straight toward my bedroom. I couldn't take it anymore. I threw my essential belongings into a small backpack and decided to leave the place immediately. When I stepped outside of the side door into the yard, it was almost 4 a.m. and a thick fog was suffocating the Toledo suburbs. I walked fast toward the nearby bus stop about a quarter-mile away. The streets were completely empty of cars, and I got on the very first bus that arrived, went straight to the airport, and booked the first flight back to my hometown. A few days after I got back, I couldn't get what happened out of my head. My conscience was eating me alive because of those pictures of the children. I decided to call the Lucas County Sheriff's Office in Ohio and filed a detailed report about what I saw in the basement apartment and the photos underneath the floorboards. The police took the report seriously and sent a unit to search the house. 2 days later, the detective in charge called me back. His voice was filled with absolute shock. He said, "We raided the house. Old Man Arthur and his wife were found dead in their bed. They've been dead for at least 2 weeks from gas poisoning, which means there were rotting corpses the entire time you were staying there." My mind went completely blank. I asked him in a panicked voice, "Then who's the man I talked to?" The detective let out a heavy sigh and said in a terrified tone, "When we moved the wardrobe, we didn't just find pipes. We found a massive network of narrow, dark, wood-lined tunnels extending under the entire neighborhood. We found belongings of missing children dating back to the 80s and secret passages leading inside the walls. We uncovered extremely tight spaces in the tunnels right under the floorboards of the neighbors' bedrooms, perfectly designed for someone to lay flat on their backs and listen to everything happening above them. 10 years have passed since that night. The tunnels were completely filled with concrete and they never caught the person or the thing that was living down there. I tried to forget everything and live a normal life in my new high-rise apartment in Boston. But about a week ago, the humidity in my bedroom started rising for no reason, and dark spots began appearing on the plaster ceiling. Yesterday, at exactly 1 p.m., while I was reading in the quiet living room, I heard it clearly. A faint, steady dragging sound, like something heavy was sliding very slowly inside my bedroom wall, followed by a tiny whisper coming from right behind the power outlet next to my bed. It was the sound of a wet, hissing breath saying, "We missed you." I'm not exactly an expert on imaginary friends, but even I can tell you that they're supposed to be imaginary. I mean, duh, right? That's what I told myself when my daughter started mentioning hers, telling me all about their adventures together and what fun games they'd play when my daughter got home from school in the afternoons. It mostly included tea parties, hopscotch, and dress-up, but there were a few she told me about that kind of didn't really make sense to me. Take hide and seek, for example. How exactly are you going to hide from someone who's not visible, let alone seek them? But, like I said, I just chalked it up to her imagination running wild. And what further cemented that belief was the fact that we had only just buried her dog 2 weeks ago before she started talking about this made-up friend of hers. We never told her about the accident, how I had mistakenly backed my car over her little puppy while in a rush to get to work. We knew it would crush her to find out, so we lied. Told her that her little Maxie had run away, that we'd put up flyers and that he'd come home soon. I think that's what caused her to create her own companion, someone that would be by her side for as long as she let them. But who was I to judge? Who was I to crush my baby's dreams after literally killing her best friend in the world? I just let her do her thing. All the better if I kept her from prying about what happened to Maxie. It worked out for a while. Hell, part of me wondered if she'd even missed the dog. She hadn't so much as mentioned his name. Things started getting shaky, though, when I came home from work one day to find my little girl sitting alone with her tea kit spread out in front of her. She wore a cute little princess tiara and dress we got her for Christmas last year. It was honestly a melancholic moment. I wish I could have been there to see her get all dressed up. Her face didn't match the outfit, though. She looked pissed. "Emily told me Maxie isn't coming back," she snapped. "She said that you lied about him running away and that he's never coming back." I was dumbstruck. I had literally just walked into the house. "Honey, no," I pouted. "Daddy would never lie to you about something like that. Look, come here. Let me hold... Wait." Her words finally fully registered. "Who is Emily?" "You know who Emily is, you big fat meanie," she cried, scrunching her face into a ball. "She's my best friend since you took Maxie." Before I could reply, she ran off towards her bedroom, announcing, "Come on, Emily, let's play somewhere else." To say I was shocked would be an understatement. I thought that maybe my wife had been talking about it with one of her friends, and maybe my daughter overheard. So my first thought was to ask her. However, she flat out denied it before I could even finish my question. Yeah, she's been talking about that since she got home from school. It was bound to happen sooner or later. Don't worry. Right, because that's the part I was worried about. My daughter avoided me like the plague that night. I seriously had never felt so dead to her. Even still, I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. I just tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and switched on her nightlight like usual. Before I went to bed that night, there were a million thoughts circulating around in my mind, most of which were about how to tell my daughter what had really happened. I still couldn't think of the words, but I made a promise to myself that I'd tell her the next night, whether I was ready or not. Unfortunately, that plan was dissolved when, around 3 o'clock that morning, I was awoken by my wife, shaking me while screaming. "Roxy's gone," she screeched. "I just checked her bed and she's not there. I've looked around the entire house." This had me jumping out of bed before my brain could even register what was happening. Luckily for us, the search didn't last that long. We didn't have to call the police. We didn't have to garner a search team. All we had to do was check our backyard. That's where we found her, kneeling over Maxie's grave in her pink Hello Kitty pajamas. When I saw her, all I could do was scoop her up in my arms and hold her close while I cried. To my dismay, she started actively fighting to get away from me, screaming, kicking, and clawing. And in the chaos, I saw the source of her anger. Maxie's grave had been dug up, and his corpse lay beside it, rotten, bones exposed, and maggots had already made his body their new all-you-can-eat buffet. Once my wife took my daughter from my arms and she settled down enough to finally speak, all she had to say was, "Why did Emily show me and not you?" This happened years ago, and I was maybe 21 at the time, and I was an hour away from home. It was the first time being so far away and on my own, and I was really nervous. I was at a psychiatrist's office, and I used an insurance service for the ride home. I was waiting so long for someone to accept my ride home that the office actually closed while I was waiting, and I had to wait outside alone in an empty parking lot. It was terrifying, and my phone was low battery. I got into my Uber, but as we were driving away, he realized how far the drive would be. My heart sank as he said that he was going to go to his girlfriend's house to see if she could drive me. I was frantically texting my family and friends because I was terrified. He drove me there, and I sat in the car waiting anxiously as he went inside. The only thing that kept me calm was the fact that he left me outside and the car wasn't locked, so I could run for it if I needed to. My phone died while I was waiting, so I was scared for my life. I just kept telling myself that if he was a murderer, he wouldn't leave me in an unlocked car outside of his house. His girlfriend ended up yelling at him because she could tell that I was scared, and he ended up driving me home. When I got home, I ran inside, and it was the scariest moment of my life. Since my insurance company was responsible for the ride, I couldn't leave him a review, so I just didn't say anything. At that point, I was just happy to be alive. These things are true and happened back in 1992 when my then girlfriend and I were dating. It's a Friday night and we're in a packed movie theater. A couple around our age ask if the 2 seats next to me are taken. We say they aren't and let them past us. That Sunday morning, we drive to Disneyland. It's about an hour away and we arrive at 10 a.m. In the parking lot, there are trams that pick you up and bring you to the front entrance. It was packed with people, and a man says that there are 2 seats next to him. We walk down the aisle and realize it's the same couple that sat next to us at the movies. We all laughed and wondered what the odds were. On Thursday, around noon, we decide to hit Zuma Beach. It's a 45-minute drive south of Disneyland. We were there for about 3 hours. In the parking lot, we're just getting adjusted. I start the car and I'm looking through my tapes for something to listen to. My girlfriend grabs my arm to get my attention and says, "Oh my god," while she's looking at the car that just pulled in next to us on her side. I look over and it's the same couple staring at us. They look as confused as we do. I quickly pulled out and got the hell out of there. I'm not someone who gets freaked out easily. I was seriously disturbed for a minute. We talked about that all the time, never figured it out, never saw them again. Weird. I'm an ex-insurance investigator, and the most unsettling arson case I worked was at the Masonic Temple in the historic Black Business District in downtown Birmingham, Alabama. This beautiful 8-story Renaissance Revival-style building was constructed in the 1920s and included a massive marble lobby and a grand, and I mean grand, ballroom. It also housed numerous black-owned businesses like tailors, dressmakers, attorneys, doctors, dentists, the NAACP, etc., etc. After integration and white flight, the businesses closed or moved, resulting in the building becoming vacant, with the exception of the still functioning Masons. Even though the building was heavily secured and guarded by a single security officer, it was still breached by squatters or crackheads who managed to cause a fire on the 3rd floor. That's where I came in. My job was to determine the source, cause, and extent of the fire damage. That meant exploring the entire building, which had no electricity because the fire department cut it until it was deemed safe to resume electrical services. The grand ballroom took up the entire 2nd floor and luckily had no damage, so I just admired the exquisite millwork and decor. The 3rd floor housed mostly professional offices. Some even contained their original mid-century furniture in pristine condition. The 4th floor, however, became darker. Literally darker. I used a flashlight to advance down the gloomy hallways and inspect every room. I found the NAACP office that was literally frozen in time, file cabinets and all. As I was moving down the 2nd hallway, my eyes fixated on a large, looming structure in the far corner. I slowly made my way closer, nervous about what I would find. Finally, I was close enough to discover a fucking coffin. An old Dracula-style coffin, standing up at the end of the hall. I didn't dare touch it. As I ascended the building alone, each floor proved darker and gloomier than the one before, even though each floor had the same amount of windows. And the further I moved up, the more fucking coffins I found. In the middle of offices and closets, blocking doors from the inside. It made no sense until I got to the top floor. There, I found only 2 businesses, a coffin company and the Order of the Eastern Star. I had an overwhelming feeling that I absolutely should not be there, especially not snooping around the OES lodge. I snapped a few pics, then bolted down the hall and hit the stairwell to the lobby. The only area I hadn't inspected was the basement, and I wasn't sure my nerves were up to it. I discovered a full fallout shelter down there. Hundreds of drums of community shelter supplies. Water, food, medical supplies, radiation detectors, everything. The whole building was a massive time capsule, and I felt like I went back in time just being there. That was definitely my most interesting and spooky investigation.